Jeff and I had become friends, so I went to Jeff and I said, hey, look, Jeff, I have $20,000. I need 980, and I'm there. And so I'm just a little short. I'm just a little short.
You're almost there.
I'm just a little short, but I think we can get there. He asked me what my plan was for the station, and I told him, and we worked it out.
Your dad moved to Houston.
He did. He moved to, he was the first black graduate of UT. Got his master's degree in architecture, and his first black architect in the state of Texas. You know, the value enhancement program, I think that's incredible. To me, an organization that's as alive at the bottom as it is at the top is one that works and that wins, right? Where everybody really has a stake, can make a difference.
Welcome to the LyondellBasell podcast series. Today we've got a great conversation in store for you with LYB board member Tony Chase. I actually met Tony earlier this year ahead of our Global Leaders Forum. That's where 150 of the top leaders at LYB fly in from all over the world to meet, discuss company strategy, initiatives, and more. I was asked to host a fireside chat with Tony during the forum so that the attendees could hear him, get to know him, find some inspiration in his story. They certainly did, but more on that in a bit. First, let me give you some background on Tony. Tony Chase is a chairman and CEO of ChaseSource LP. He previously started and sold 3 different ventures: Chase Radio Partners, Cricket Wireless, and Chase Com. Tony grew up in Houston, attending public schools. He is an honors graduate of Harvard College, Harvard Law School, and Harvard Business School. He was a tenured professor at the University of Houston, where he taught law for 30 years. Tony's company, ChaseSource, is ranked by Black Enterprise Magazine as one of the nation's largest minority-owned businesses. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, back to finding inspiration in Tony's story. His fireside chat went over so well at the Global Leaders Forum that we decided to bring the conversation to you. So let's get into this special edition of the LYB podcast, filmed earlier this year with LYB board member Tony Chase.
First of all, Tony, thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here. In fact, I'm honored to be here with you. You know, where you are is a great place to be. And so many people, I feel like, I'll speak personally, that we aren't grateful enough, right? Just the fact that we're in this room suggests that we are in much better position than most people in this world. And a good deal of it has to do with our own talents, but a good deal of it has to do with things outside of our talents. And so gratitude probably is in order as well.
Well, we're really grateful that you're here as well, Tony.
Thank you.
So, I know that you and I chatted a few months ago, and I felt very inspired by my conversation with Tony, and I think you all are in for a real treat because Tony has a very interesting story. You have a very interesting upbringing as well, and I know we're going to talk about your entrepreneurial spirit and your leadership, but it all really began at a young age for you. Your dad was such a trailblazer. So let's start from the beginning. Let's start with your just upbringing. At what point did you feel like, I might be an entrepreneur? And what really impacted you the most?
Sure. So my dad, I appreciate you mentioning my dad, Deepa, because he passed away in 2012. You know, I think about him every day, I think. He grew up in Maryland, and to make a pretty long story short, he applied to the University of Texas to go to the School of Architecture. He was really interested in architecture. and he was denied because he was black. At that time, UT hadn't admitted any black students. And so Thurgood Marshall, who was head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at the time, called him up and said, we want to file a lawsuit. And long story short, they did. It went up to Supreme Court. My dad joined the Army, went to fight in the Philippines while the case wound its way through the court system. They won the Supreme Court case, and he came to Austin to register at University of Texas, first black student, in the fall of 1951. And that was pretty amazing.
First black student at UT, was your dad.
Yeah. The really lucky part, though, that's how this works, right? The really lucky part for him and for me is that he couldn't live on campus because, they got the admit black students part, okay, but black students living on campus, that wasn't happening quite yet. And so he lived in East Austin. As some of you know, that's historically been the minority side of Austin. But he met my mom, and so I was born a couple of years in 1955 after that. So it was great.
And then your dad moved to Houston.
He did. He moved to he was the first black graduate of UT. Got his master's degree in architecture, and he's first black architect in the state of Texas. And architecture's, interesting. Engineers appreciate, there at least was an apprenticeship requirement in order to get licensed. And so he went through that process. He got licensed and decided that he would work for himself because it was difficult to get a job. And his thesis when he was at UT School of Architecture was about the black church and the design of the black church, which is kind of smart, right? Because if there was any institution in the black community that had capital, it was a church. And so every Sunday as a kid, growing up, we would go, and my dad had gotten a lot of press because when he was admitted to UT, it was in the papers and all that stuff. And so every Sunday we'd go to a different church around the state. We'd get in the car and we'd drive, and it was awful. And and we'd go to a different black church. And for those of you who've been in a black church, they'd scream and holler and no. And then finally they would say, and we're honored to have today, the person you read about who graduated from UT, and by the way, we've got a new building fund, then we're going to pass the plate for that. And they would, ask my dad to design the church. So he designed a number of black churches around the state, but then he started doing different things. He did the George R. Brown Convention Center.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if you were just going to throw that in as a throwaway. Yeah. And also he designed the George R. Brown Convention Center.
He was a good guy.
Tony's dad. Yeah.
Yeah, good guy.
All right, so then you grow up in Houston. You went to public schools here in Houston. Mm-hmm. You end up going to, you moved to the East Coast, finished your schooling there.
Right.
And then you go on to Harvard.
Right.
So Harvard Business School, then Harvard Law School.
Mm-hmm. And Harvard College. College, law school, business
College,
school.
Law school, business school, okay.
Mm-hmm.
You finished law school, but you didn't really like law school. But
not so much.
Not
right. No, I finished
not your favorite.
Not my favorite.
Not your favorite.
Not my favorite.
So you got
intellectually, academically, law school was fabulous. It was fabulous. Never been as sort of intellectually, challenged and excited as in my law school classes. But sorry, Jeff, but practicing, practicing law, I mean, God, that's awful. Right? It's awful.
It's like, where are the attorneys?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my sense is, right, and that's sort of relevant to this conversation, I think, is that there are two types of people in this world. They're bakers and they're slicers, And lawyers are slicers, right? I mean, they kind of are to me, right? They are. I mean, and I always wanted to be more of a baker, So,
okay. So after college, you decided to do the baking first?
Well.
Or did we do slicing and then baking?
Well, you sort of have to slice a little first.
Okay, so so is that when you decided to teach law?
Yeah, well, I decided to teach,
Didn't love law school, but then got asked to be a professor of law.
Right, that's true. So, in short, what happened, I went first to work for an investment banking firm. And I worked in New York on Wall Street for a while, and then, after doing that for 6 years or so, New York was difficult for me, just sort of in general, and I really did want to do things on my own, entrepreneurial, and I thought it'd be better to do that in Houston, to come home and do it. And problem was I didn't have any money, and so I needed a job to pay the rent and so forth, and I had done pretty well in law school, so U of H asked me to teach, and I thought that was great, and so I hustled to get tenure pretty quickly, so that, because once you're tenured, you can sort of do anything. That's the way I looked at it, and so that's what it was. So it would give me the opportunity to do other things.
So then how did you begin your business ventures?
My entrepreneurial journey.
Yes.
Okay, so
where did it start?
I began, it's interesting to talk about it in this building. I'll tell you why. My first foray into entrepreneurship, I bought a radio station. And the reason I did was because I was teaching law at U of H during the day. And I had, when I was in college, been a DJ on the college radio station. I had a jazz show called Breakfast Jam, and I love jazz. And I was really into it when I was in college. That the show went from 6 to 8 in the morning because we turned off the transmitter. The radio station went off air at overnight, so I had to come into the station an hour early to turn on the transmitter so it would warm up to full
Takes
power.
time to warm up.
Right.
I've had to do that as well.
Yeah,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and so 5 o'clock in the morning to get to the radio station, particularly in Cambridge, Massachusetts, it was ridiculously cold. But I loved it. And I thought I knew a lot about radio. And when I worked in investment banking in New York, I was primarily banking media and communications companies. And so I thought, I'd buy a radio station. And the reason why this building is interesting to talk about this in is because, of course, when I wanted to buy a radio station, and I found one to buy in Dallas, KHRB, it cost $1 million. It was a daytime, because it was an AM station. Many AM stations go off at night. And it was a black gospel, it was programmed black gospel. Again, kind of a relation to what my dad was doing and designing churches and so forth. And I'd sort of grown up in the black church, and I thought I knew about radio. I thought I knew about black gospel, et cetera, and I thought it made a whole lot of sense. The only problem was I didn't have $1 million. And, but, so. But
Details.
I'd gone to business school at Harvard with Jeff Hines, whose father's business was headquartered here, who actually his father built this building, right? And Jeff and I had become friends, so I went to Jeff and I said, hey, look, Jeff, I have $20,000. I need 980, and I'm there. And so I'm just a little short. I'm just a little short.
Amount. You're almost there.
I'm just a little short, but I think we can get there. And we talked about it for a while. He asked me what my plan was for the station, and I told him, and we worked it out. And so I bought this station, and, long story short, and I bought 7 more, and not with Jeff, though, interestingly. Jeff stayed a partner in that station and until we sold all of them a few years later.
So you sell all the stations,
Mm-hmm.
but then you invest in the next venture.
Yeah,
Which
right.
is not radio.
Right.
But kind of related.
Yeah.
How did you decide what to venture into next?
I think it's relevant for this conversation that, opportunity abounds, It's sort of all around us. It's not that we have to search out and find opportunity. I mean, you do, but it's there. And I think the more difficult part is to recognize it and take advantage of it. So it was the late 90s, cell phones and internet were still to come. And there was the experience in Scandinavia. They had cell phone adoption pretty well before we did, several years before we did. And it seemed pretty clear to me that was the way the world was going. And so when there was a federal government auction to sell spectrum to offer cell phone service, I thought, that's where I need to be. And it was pretty clear, all the big companies, the Bell operating companies in particular, Sprint as well, AT&T, they were all over this. And but they wanted to, create cell service for people who could afford it, right? People who could pay their bills and without much trouble. And I thought there was a significant opportunity for because once the service became ubiquitous, which it seemed to me it almost certainly would, then it would be, critical for all people to have connection. And so my, idea was Cricket, right?
Cricket Wireless. Do you guys remember the commercials?
Yeah. And so I opened the first Cricket market. Cricket was predicated on basically prepaid phone service, right? It was all you could eat for $25. All you could eat, meaning all the calls you could make for $25 a month, and you had to pay your $25 up front at the beginning of the month. Otherwise, we cut off your service. And that was great because it essentially eliminated customer service, because 80% of customer service in the phone business is about the bill, and if there's no bill, we didn't send bills, then it really streamlined our cost on that. And it really was predicated on the technology being able to handle the load, because we knew we'd have a lot of demand. And there was a fellow out in California named Irwin Jacobs, who founded Qualcomm, who had come up with this spread spectrum technology, CDMA, for those of you who are familiar. And he and I met and became really good friends. He's long since passed away now. He passed away about 15 years ago, I guess. He was such a great guy, real scientist. And basically, Cricket became the showroom for his technology here in America because he hadn't, so we partnered, and I built the first 4 Cricket markets. The first one was all in Tennessee. That's where I bought the spectrum from the federal government. I had to bid for that spectrum. I bid $26 million for the spectrum. I didn't have that either.
I was going to say, did you make a lot of money since
Didn't
the last
have that
time you
either.
asked for money?
Yeah,
You had to borrow a little bit of that
Didn't
too?
have that either. Yeah,
Okay.
But
You seem to have a knack for asking for money and getting
that
it.
was just.
Maybe that should be the next fireside chat,
Yeah.
how to ask for a lot of money. But it was such a successful technology, CDMA,
Yep.
Cricket Wireless. Like, you tapped into a market and found a niche that no one else had really tapped into. But then you decided to get out of that as well.
I did, but only because, there's a time for everything and a place, and my time and place was over. I built the first 4 Cricket markets: Chattanooga, Nashville, Memphis, Knoxville. Covered the entire state of Tennessee. But then I needed $5 billion to build out a national network. And maybe, but nah. You know what I mean? Nah.
We draw the line at $5 billion.
Well, or I could have a really nice payday and go to the next thing, right, that was appropriate for me. And, being a telephone person, come on, I'm not a telephone person. I'm not that. So I sold to AT&T. Yeah.
Sold to AT&T. All right, next business venture then.
Well.
Not radio.
No.
Not telephone.
No.
What was this third one?
Call centers, because I'd gotten to know AT&T and gotten to know sort of the phone business. The internet was, and that really was the gateway for me, gateway technology, right? Because all of a sudden bandwidth made phone calls cheap. If you really think about it, I think it made the acquisition of information, the cost, zero, right? All of a sudden, people could access, you think about it today, how you use your navigation system to get, how much time does that save you, right? Versus, you remember when we had to stop at the gas station and ask for directions? You people, it's amazing. So anyway, phone calls became cheap, and so, and I had this relationship with, in the telephone business with AT&T. So I set up a call center. Actually, here in Houston was the first one, but the real opportunity was offshore in India and Chile, and I set up call centers in those places to arbitrage labor prices and to take advantage of the ability to make cheap phone calls back into the United States for customer service. And so built that up. We had a couple of thousand agents, and then sold that to AT&T as well. So later on, yeah.
And that's all before your current role.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because when we met first, we were talking about just having that entrepreneurial spirit. And as someone that's never owned a business, for a lot of us in this room who've never been entrepreneurs, you said something really interesting that really sat with me. You said that even if you're not an entrepreneur, we all have that entrepreneurial spirit in us.
Absolutely.
Explain what you mean by that.
Absolutely. So it is my view, right? And I'm certain it's right. I just am that that each of us, opportunity abounds for each of us, and it's how we take advantage of it, or if we take advantage of it, right? Do we take the risks that are in front of us, or do we just let it slide? Do we think about how we might do it better, how it might be done better, or do we just let it slide, right? And it's risky to take the risk. I grant you that, it is. Because as any entrepreneur, I think, that's worth its salt, what she will tell you is that if you take enough risk, you'll get hurt. You'll lose, you'll fail. But the key is not to fail. The key is to fail small and win big, right? And so to really, take calculated risk, risk to adjust the risk based on the possible return, but to always take risk. And, I think often when, let's put it this way, in larger companies, in any company, the most successful companies are those that are characterized by entrepreneurial spirit, but within the people in the company. And that's true whether the company has 10 people or 10,000. It's the same.
I'm glad you said that, because this is obviously a company of more than 10 people. What sort of entrepreneurial spirit do you see at LYB and in Peter, just in your experience as an LYB board member?
It's fun now, for me, in a way that when I first joined, it was much less so. I mean, just certain things, the value enhancement program, I think that's incredible. To me, an organization that's as alive at the bottom as it is at the top is one that works and that wins, right? Where everybody really has a stake, can make a difference in their own lives, but also in the lives of the people around them, that really have an opportunity to move the needle. The value enhancement program is one way, it seems to me, that's very tangible, generating several $100 million that came out of nowhere, right? It's real money. It makes a real difference. I look at, the new strategy, how transformational it is. The plastic recycling facility, that's all entrepreneurial. People bring in little plastic bags, to be recycled. It's, how do you do that? You have to create a system that is completely entrepreneurial in order to make that work. I think it's tremendously exciting. And each of us, I would suspect, in your own jobs, have opportunities to do things, to look at things in a different way. Just because these things have been done the same way for, however long, I mean, that's almost evidence that it's probably not, there's probably a better way to do it. I mean, there just is. And it needs to make sense. It needs to, but then I think you have to try it, and you're going to fail with some of this stuff, and that's okay too. That's okay too. But that's the way, and it's a tremendous transformation. and I've been here almost, exactly for the transformation, right? I was here about, I don't know, a little over a year. I started my tenure on the LYB board before Peter got here. I was on the selection committee for the new CEO. And Peter always seemed like the guy to me.
Let's wrap it up the way that we started. I asked you about your upbringing, your family, but tell us about your family.
Sure.
What does your family look like now? Kids, wife?
Yeah, all the above.
Okay.
What is my family? My immediate family. So I told you my dad passed away in 2012. My beloved mom, who was, my dad was great, but my mom was fabulous. So my mom passed away 3 years ago. She lived with us she lived with me and my immediate family the last 4 years of her life, which was great. It's particularly great for my kids.
Is that why you're
spoiled people that they are.
I was like, is that why you're choked up? Because she did spend those last few years.
Well, just cause.
Yeah, she's your mom.
She's my mom. So my family. I have a wife. I've been married for 35 years. Don't tell her that I really don't know the number. I don't. It's been a long time.
We won't tell.
It's been a long time. I love her to death. She's amazing. I met her when she was a student at Wellesley College in Boston. So we met, way back when. And in any case, and we've had a lot of fun over the last many years. We have one biological child who is 32 and lives here in Houston. He's doing great. And we adopted 2 kids, each as infants. The first was an abandoned child. They think he was a week old. He's now, get this, he's 20 and he's an architecture student at UT.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good story. It is. And then he has got a younger sister who we adopted from Africa. She is 16, with all that means.
That sounds fun.
Oh my God. She just got her driver's license. It's just awful.
I have a 16-year-old too.
It's just
nerve-wracking.
awful.
Yes.
It's just awful.
I can empathize.
No, she's wonderful. Her name, we named her Abyssinia, which is the original name of Ethiopia. And we call her Kat. Her middle name is my mom's name. And so that's my family. I've got a sister who, a younger sister whose birthday was a couple of days ago, and she's a lawyer at Shell. She's been there for 25 years, something like that. That's my family.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice, Tony.
Mm-hmm.